Welcome Miho Hazama to Brown University, please.
Thank you.
I'm very excited for you to be here, Miho.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and we, just to give a little bit of context, the Brown Jazz Band has been working on Miho's music throughout the semester, and now you're here for 4 days, 2 rehearsals with a big band. You're going to visit our jazz composition class. We have some students from that class here.
That's great.
Actually, all of you.
That's great. Yay, that's great.
And some faculty.
Great.
And yeah, this is a talk that sometimes we do that right before the concert, but
Right.
it was a little hard to schedule this time. But
Sure.
basically, I just want to give you the opportunity to talk a little bit about your music and about your artistry.
Sure.
And maybe let's start out by, so obviously I'm a fan of your music and we've known each other for many years and we've worked
Right.
together, and it's so interesting. Your music sounds a lot easier than it is to play, which is what we've noticed right when we started to work on the charts. And one of the things that I've noticed in your music is going so deep in it this semester is it's so full of colors. You know, it's like the idea of like tone colors
Right.
is so striking, and you have these wonderful ways of combining different sections, which I think is part of this challenge of playing this music. It's not that you have like
Sure.
blocks
Right.
in the big band,
Right.
but you mix these sections in a really cool way. So there's like the trumpet fours playing a melody with a soprano,
Right.
saxophone, and then that gets, you know, mingled up with other kinds of things, and it's really hard to, all of these axes have to match in order
Right.
for the whole thing to sound well.
Right.
I'm very interested in your approach to color, because you also use a lot of different instrumentation,
Right.
doublings in the saxophone section, for example, with
Sure.
flutes and clarinets, but also you use strings in your own bands. How do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that all the sound color palettes, like the colors on the palette, came from my music background, like how I grew up. I'm originally from Japan, and I used to go to a music school back in Japan where I played piano, electric organ, and a composition. I also studied a composition there, maybe since age 5, 6, 7, something like that. And the way you play electric organ is that you can imitate any kind of music. So you play melody on the right hand, harmony on the left hand, bass line on the left leg, and volume pedal, like program thing, on the right leg. And you assign all the note, like a color, sound colors, and then you register rhythm, and then you can imitate anything. So I used to play classical symphonic music on electric organ since I was probably like 7 years old. And they had like annual competition that you can join, and then I used to play all the music by Tchaikovsky, Rimsky-Korsakov, all those like Russian composers, and more modern French composers such as Ravel, and the Italian composer Respighi, and those composers got huge influence on me because I got to just read those like small scores for the orchestra scores to
Like reduced scores?
Exactly.
Okay.
It's not that big, but there's like a pocket score, it's called. And you can still read every instrument on the score. And that was my process of trying to imitate this music on the electric organ. So at age of 9 or 10, I used to read this score, and then I was able to read it, which is kind of the same level as probably the music college would do, same thing at the age 9. So that was a huge influence on me already by the time that I wanted to be a composer.
Interesting.
So my brain sound is full of colors, and I still struggle to write big band or concert band because there's no strings. I always need a zun kind of sound because that's my instinct sound of my brain And so although my musical interest was jazz, and that was main reason to move to New York City to study with Jim McNeely, who's a phenomenal jazz composer. But when they asked me to make my own band, I felt not ready to write for a big band. So that's the reason why I came up with this 13-piece jazz chamber orchestra thing, which is my orchestra called M Unit. 3 saxophones, 1 trumpet, 1 French horn. French horn is such a also like, yes, exactly. It's such a like, symphonic, instrument, but I love it. And 4 string players, and a vibraphone, piano, bass, drums. And also for big band writing, I got a huge influence by Vince Mendoza, Maria Schneider, and Jim McNeely, my professor. And especially when you see Maria Schneider's score, you see so many complicated interaction with the in the orchestra, where you never actually work as a section, and then these like maze kind of orchestration going on that players really have to understand a score. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to play that kind of thing. So that's actually a different game than reading the charts perfectly by yourself. You really have to pay attention to what other people do, and then you're going to see your role finally. I really like that kind of way.
Yeah.
So that's kind of all my mindset for orchestration.
Yeah, we've really noticed that when we were rehearsing your music, because a lot of time, I mean, you even have these like almost hockety pieces where the melody is distributed over different instruments. You might just play 1 or 2 notes of it, and then it goes to the next instrument. And every player needs to know their role, because otherwise, you might be tenor player and you're not together with a Barry player, and you think you're wrong, but you're actually right.
Exactly.
So you have to know your role in the music.
Exactly. Like my primary instrument was piano, but then piano is such an individual instrument. But I really, really like to be in the ensemble. So I used to be in an ensemble when I was a kid with a lot of electric organs. Also, when I was at the college studying classical composition back in Tokyo, I was in the college big band, like you guys. So although I had no idea how to swing, and we played awful Count Basie, but we just had so much fun. And I really like to be in an ensemble playing piano. I mean, piano is maybe not hurt, but I don't care. I just want to know what they're doing, and I want to support them. I maybe want to color them, that kind of thing. I really like it.
What kind of music did you listen to growing up besides Tchaikovsky and Shostakovich and classical music?
Yeah, besides classical music, I think I got the huge influence from my parents' favorite music. So definitely from 70s music, pop music. And my father is much more like British rock music fan, but my mother is more like American disco music fan. And then I think I went to the disco side. So I still remember that I was living in really countryside back in Japan, northern part of Japan. And I got this like a $5 coin. And I was so excited to go to this department store that has this huge CD shop at the time. And the first record, or like a CD I got by myself, spending this $5, was the Earth, Wind & Fire best song album.
Yeah.
And I still have that. And then, that's my favorite group ever, I think. And then I'm so sad that I didn't really see them live before, a couple members passed away, unfortunately, already. But yeah, that's the one artist that I still love to go to, their shows. And also fusion crossover music has been really big in Japan for a long time. And I think that was another reason why I got so into jazz or like fusion music naturally, because it was so big. So when I was in the high school or like middle high school, I got really into Michael Brecker and the Brecker brothers.
Yeah.
You play, tenor saxophone, so
Same. I'm of the same generation.
Exactly.
I was into it too. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's also other thing. But yeah, I think these are my favorite.
So is that how you got introduced to jazz, through the Brecker brothers, or?
Not really, because of this electric organ competition. Although I play classical music, but then there are so many other competition candidates who play semi-nestico, like a big band music, also jazz music, fusion. And we also had to do some like improvisation on the electric organ. So I used to listen to like my parents' CDs that also have like a jazz compilation albums and all that, but I just didn't really know what that music was. I liked it, but then I didn't really know. And the more I got to know about Herbie Hancock and Michael Brecker, I think the more I started like, searching the things around them to know that it's actually jazz.
Yeah. So you moved to the US to attend Manhattan School of Music. I'm just curious, do you have thoughts about how when you get introduced into jazz in Japan, is there a different way of dealing with jazz in Japan if you compare it to the US? And I'm asking this because I also am not from the US.
That's right.
And I got introduced to jazz in Europe.
Right.
I'm just curious, do you have any thoughts on that?
I think it gets really better now. But when I was at the college, that was from 2005 to 9, I believe. So that's a long time ago. And so that's, at the time I was going to the classical music college, and there was no jazz major. So there were like several jazz classes that you can just take as a minor. And the way they taught, well, in general, the way Japanese college or like the schools teach students is to do one side from teacher. There's like a big like blackboard that a teacher can write it down, and then students can just see it and then write it down to your note. That was it basically. That's probably really old school. Maybe it's changed now. But so that means that there's actually not much interaction between students and a teacher.
Interesting.
It's just a teacher teaching, saying something. And if you're not interested in, the students just, can sleep in front of the teachers. And I used to actually sleep a lot in front of the college teachers.
Don't you ever do
I know.
this?
Well, no, that's actually never allowed in the US. That was a huge shock to me, because you really have to interact with the teacher all the time, because teacher asks you a question all the time. And when I went to MSM, I couldn't speak English, first of all. And everyone's like, I want to say something. And I don't want to say something. I can't speak English. I don't know. So that was a huge difference, first of all. Just generally how people interact in the classes. And then I love this way, so keep this way. This is great. But also, because of that, not like a way of teaching, jazz was also taught be just one side with the theory, which was so wrong to me. That I was lucky enough to listen to enough jazz music before those theories, so that when I got those theory or like a jazz scale or like I don't know, like harmonization, then I was like, oh, that's what it comes from Chick Corea. Oh, that's what it comes from Brad Meldo, because I listened to them. But then all the students who were who were interested in jazz, but then they didn't listen to jazz. It's like, whoa, this is too much information all of a sudden. And then like if I were to use this scale, then maybe I can play this way. But that's not how jazz works. I think you have to listen to a lot of music. I mean, maybe music itself, music in general. You have to listen to a lot of music to be a musician. And then to feel that way, how you feel, then you can learn how that actually works theoretically. But that was completely upside down, like an opposite way to learn. So I didn't really enjoy or appreciate that system of teaching, unfortunately.
Gotcha. Interesting. I'm curious about your thoughts on tradition, because we play some of Miho's original music, but we also play some of your really great arrangements, and you have this whole book on, or arrangements on Thelonious Monk's music, and we're playing, I think, 3 of those pieces. And it's really interesting because you really make them your own. Like Friday the 13th is a samba. Epistrophe, the 8 sections are straight, even 8s, you know.
Sure.
The Thelonious, his tune Thelonious starts with tuning, you know. So it's really interesting. I'm just curious how, especially living in Japan, living in the U.S., how do you think about tradition, and particularly when it comes to big band, which is such a traditional ensemble, or
Jazz, you mean jazz?
Jazz, sorry,
traditional, yeah, right.
Like an ensemble with such a deep tradition, right? I'm curious if you have any thoughts on that.
Sure. I think, jazz also, jazz big band has such a long history from 20s, which was a dance hall music. But now a lot of former past composers made a huge effort to make it from dance music to art, which I really appreciate. And now those living composers nowadays make this art to be even more cutting edge or like avant-garde, which is really interesting. And I also, as much as I have a respect to the composers back in the 20s and the 30s, but also the way of using the big band itself has been changed.
Yeah.
So whenever I think of the writing arrangements on those kind of the simpler jazz standards, sometimes, of course, I can probably write a really straightforward, arrangement as needed. But I'd like to just put a little part of myself, like my life, to reflect on the music. So is it going to be like a sadness? Is it going to be a joke? Is it going to be funny thing, sad or happiness, whatever? Yeah, that's kind of my way of controlling or like considering how much of myself to put into this arrangement. If I can do that, then I'll do so much. If I shouldn't do that, which is more like, arrangement for vocalist, then you have to do really commercial way, then I would do much less.
Gotcha.
So this case, for these arrangements that we did, we're going to do on Thursday, those were initially written for Metropole Orchestra Big Band. And then I knew that there are some other pieces that are supposed to be orchestration from Thelonious Monk's solo piano performance.
Oh, okay.
So that's solo piano to just big band, but then no changes because it's supposed to be just an orchestration of solo piano performance. Then these can be different. Well, these should be, the new arrangements that I'm gonna come up should be different so that you can see the difference between what was what the Monk music at the time versus what the Monk music nowadays, if I were to interpret it. So I put much more myself into it. So that's
they're really
why.
nice. These arrangements are really cool, I have to say. Go back to this idea of color one more time.
Sure.
You actually hipped me to Ryuichi Sakamoto, and I
Right.
remember you telling, because you knew him, like you took lessons with him, if I remember
No,
correctly.
I worked for him.
Oh, you worked for him, okay. Because you told me that he was thinking about music as like, I'm trying to write black and white music.
Yeah, so that was my huge mistake in my career. But he asked me to write arrangements for orchestra on his compositions, obviously. And I got so excited. And he said, well, you can use 3 winds, 6 French horn, which is like a humongous, huge orchestra instrumentation. And when I heard of that orchestration and like instrumentation, first of all, my brain thinks, oh, more colors on my palette. Then I wrote those arrangements of the Ryuichi Sakamoto's piece with so many colors. And then I sent it to him, he's such a sweet person, so he doesn't say this is not good or anything. But then he's like, well, maybe I should have explained it a little more details so that you didn't have to do this way. But I don't think this is going to be like matching with my other music, so I might have to revise. And I was like, well, I mean, I'm so sorry that I couldn't probably do what you want. But at the same time, I was reading back my scores, and there's no huge mistake that I can find. So I was kind of skeptical. Why didn't he like it? I was kind of sad, and then went to the rehearsal, and then found out that he was conducting the orchestra, and then he also wrote some other arrangements. And his way of using that big orchestra was to make a contrast of black and white instead of using other colors. So like his brand of making a sound is always really, I don't know, to me it's like how many colors you can make between white and black, and then how much can you make it beautiful. That's kind of my interpretation of his aesthetic as a musician, compared to, well, you have 120 colors, you can use this combinations, and this combination is just like 700 combinations. That's not what he meant. So I was really shocked, but that was one of the biggest music like lesson experiences that I had. Yeah.
That's so interesting.
I mean, he didn't say that black and white or anything, but that's what I felt at the end,
That's
the
what you took away
rehearsal.
from it.
Yeah.
So interesting. I also want to talk a little bit about rhythm, because your music is very rhythmic.
Right.
And you do, I mean, I think you do employ swing, but you also have a lot of non-swing
I do.
music.
Yeah.
And you mix mixed meters with polyrhythms. We have a lot of metric modulations in your pieces. How did your thoughts about rhythm develop?
I don't actually know where those ideas are originally from.
Yeah.
Because I'm originally from Japan, and that traditional music in Japan has absolutely no rhythmic pattern. So the beauty of Japanese traditional music is like one note, silence, and then add a note. And then this silence space is the beauty, which is really beautiful interpretation to see the art. But that's so different from rhythm. So I think this is a combination of music that I've listened to, probably classical music, maybe Stravinsky music, Bernstein music, and also I'm a big fan of those disco music, pop music. Also, like there's electronica, like a pop techno kind of pop music in Japan, and I've been really a big fan of. Some Middle East music that I've been really interested in. Like, let's say if we could say Tigran Hamasyan as one of the biggest influence in jazz these days. I think he came out with really interesting rhythmic modulations. Yeah, those kind of things. It's just a really combination of
what's out there.
Listen to, I guess.
Cool. So I'm also interested in your process when you compose,
Sure.
like how, and you do so many things. So it's a hard question to pose, because I mean, yesterday you told me that right now you're working on a piece for 2 marimbas.
Right.
Then you write for the Metropole Orchestra in Amsterdam, which is a big band with strings. Then you write for the Danish radio big band, where you're the principal director, or I don't know.
Yeah, chief conductor.
Chief conductor. Then you have your own band. But when you compose, like, how do you start? How do you start writing a piece?
Yeah. Well, for me, players are always the big inspiration. So knowing who I am writing for is really a big part of my inspiration for compositions in general. So no matter what the instrumentation I'm writing for, knowing the musicians are more is much more important for me. And I usually keep the those time frame that I can write compositions, which is I'm not on a tour so that I can be home, or like at least to my parents' house in Tokyo, so that I can have the acoustic piano anytime I want. Because I really need acoustic piano to just play or try out things for sketch. And I need to hear overtones. I can't do with that, with the keyboard, because I can't hear the overtones. So whenever you hear this like a C and G and then dun, and then you hear so many overtones, and then that's gonna actually come to my brain for the sound library or any inspirations, maybe yes or no, I don't know, but then that's how I try. So I kind of keep those time frame first of all, and then up to then, I just try to keep thinking about what I could do for this composition or that composition. I have probably like 5 compositions commissioned at the moment, so that I can probably like think, oh, maybe I could do this one for this. I could do that kind of a concept to this composition. Then when you come to this time frame, then you go to piano, then do those kind of sketches. And I usually take notes on a paper, the voice message on the phone, but airplane mode, so nobody's gonna call me, which is amazing. Yeah, I mean, you can just use that as a voice recorder, but I don't have it, so I just use a phone. But anyways, then finally I go to score, which is my computer, laptop computer. I have like a, how to say, the score writing software,
program.
notation program. Yeah, so that's kind of my basic process. But sometimes if I were to keep 2 weeks to write like a short piece, but then nothing comes up for maybe 5 days in a row. But that's what it is. And although you are ready, but then you can't really come up with anything. Then,
Do you work from small to large, or large to small, or both? Like, do you work on like little ideas, motivic ideas, and you expand them and put them into a form?
I think so. I think that's the way for me. Okay. Sometimes I come up with the form first, but then you plan something bigger, but then you can't really feel everything. So I probably end up changing a lot if I were to start.
Because one thing I've noticed about your form, which I think is so cool, is there's very little repetition. I mean, there's repetition maybe in form sections, but there's something's always different.
Right.
Like a different instrument is playing the melody. There's a different kind of orchestration. There's a lot of variation, which really reminds me of classical music a little bit, which is kind of flowing in that way. So I guess this is not really a question, more of a statement, but I've really noticed how the dramaturgy of your pieces are very interesting.
Yeah, I think I probably, whenever I start, whichever I started big form or small ideas, I actually lean on a lot of playback system on a computer after started writing on a score. Then playback, although that sound library is like the ancient MIDI sound library from 30 years ago. It sounds terrible. People say it's terrible, but it sounds great to me because I've been used to this sound library for 20 years of using this same, software. So it doesn't matter. The sound doesn't matter. I just need to see if I write notes on the score and if the form actually works or not. So I kind of say it loud that I like playing back on a computer, which was impossible back in the days without the computer. So I probably lean on it so much, but yeah.
You said something actually very, very interesting right before we started talking here, when we talked with my colleague Dana Gooley about like how you play with, you compose on the piano.
Piano, yeah, right.
And how you're left-handed, so it kind of makes your bass lines stronger in a way. Yeah,
well, that means that a melody is much weaker. So I'm left-handed, and then whenever I compose, then this guy, left-handed, wants to be more exciting. And this guy's like, I don't know, I can't go with you. And I always have to come up with the melody with two weaker fingers on my weaker hand. So that means that my composition's melody used to be much, much, much weaker. And then I got this critic one day that my compositions have no melody or something like that. And I was like, that's so true because I'm coming up with the melody with these two, and they're like, meh. So since then, I tried to come up with different approach of composing, which is maybe bass line first, or like a melody first, or like rhythmic like a concept first, something like that. And then also like playing and singing at the same time, so it's a little more singable melody. Those kind of things. Yeah.
So interesting.
Yeah.
It kind of shows how it's an embodied practice, right? How your body kind of has influence on the music that comes out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
I think we should maybe open it up to questions because we have some people here that might be interested in knowing a little more about you. Raul?
Yeah. So I have one particular question about the piece we're going to play, which is Snambulance. First of all, I was like surprised by its name, it's a symptom, and also it's your original piece that consists different sections of featuring voice and guitar with completely different genres. I wonder what's your inspiration and motives when you're composing this tune?
Sure. So my main focus on that composition, named it Somnambulant, that is to that's a harmonic of the one note. I think the first one, I think the note, I think there are two, but then I think the main focus was a C sharp. And C sharp minor to me is very different from D flat minor. To me, that like how to say, like a determination. Well, like
The direction of the?
no statement of C sharp and then D flat. Like let's say C sharp minor feels very different from D flat minor. Same thing, D flat major feels very different from C sharp major, although it's exactly the same thing. So I wanted to work on this harmonic contrast using this note, and that was the main focus for my composition itself. And then also I wanted to get the huge gap between the first part with the voice and also the second part with the guitar. So guitar never comes in the first part in my original composition, and all of a sudden the guitar starts improvising. So that's kind of the also like a two sides of one thing. I think one composition can't have a two sides of like a voice side and a kind of rock side, which is very different. One note can have a different faces or like a colors as well. Yeah.
That particular piece, and maybe it's just the way it is arranged for us, because originally it's with strings, right? But it really reminds me of this Kenny Wheeler record, Music for
really?
Small and Large Ensembles, or Large and Small.
Right. Yeah, I used to play that in the college big band as well. So I'm sure that when I write for big band, that sound itself just comes back to my mind all the time. Yeah.
It's our piece with vocals, by the way.
Right. Yeah. You should check that out. It's a really beautiful record. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Garv?
Yeah, thank you so much for being here, first of all.
Yes.
I wanted to ask, I would say my compositional method is pretty similar in that, like, I was trained classically first on piano. So what I like to do is, like, start at the beginning of a piece and just compose, like, as, like, a flow. And, I've recently started getting into, like, jazz composition type stuff. And, I've been trying to start with the form and see how that works. I gotta say, like, I've really struggled because sometimes it gets a little bit like repetitive when I do something like that. So I think a challenge that I face also is like, how do I keep cohesion within a piece that I compose classically for like a non-classical like genre, I guess.
Right.
Like how do you deal with that? Because your pieces are not very repetitive, but they still never feel non-cohesive at any point. So how do you approach that?
Yeah, whenever I get those kind of questions from students or other people, I always say like, let's set up the 3 or 4 key phrase or like a key motifs. And then you can probably juggle with that, switch things around with these 4. And then I think 4 is good number for human beings. I mean, I'm not a psychologist, so I don't know. But then I think 4 is good for human beings to remember enough, but then it feels different. If you were to repeat 2 things together, then I think human beings actually remember that right away. Oh, they repeat this one again. Oh, this one again. 3 is also. 4 is actually good to be like a variety in a way. But then if you were to use this, like let's say melody A with the chord progression C, and then you can retrograde, chord progression of letter B to use the melody A. Those kind of combinations can make really various, like a new perspectives, but to get the cohesive, to get it cohesive or something like that. So, I still remember that one tenor saxophone player back in Japan criticized my music as, your music sounds like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H. It's like, 10 new, elements. But in a way, maybe at the time, maybe that was kind of right. But then since then, I also tried to be, limit my ideas within the 4 or 5, and then use this in a different ways, so that it sounds like A, B, C, D, F, G, da, 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 but it's actually not. It's actually A, B, C, D, and then I use these kind of things in a different ways to puzzle together. Yeah.
Thank you.
You can try it away, yeah. Yeah.
Emma?
Thank you so much. I have a question kind of working off of that. I was wondering in the context, when you're teaching your own compositions or introducing it to a band, you mentioned kind of responding to players and being inspired by players, but also there's this very complicated nature to the compositions. How do you balance kind of taking input from players with teaching a very complicated score?
Right, that's a tough question. Well, at least what I can do for the musician to represent really complicated music is to make the music as simple notation as possible, so that it's easier for them to read. Sometimes people want to make really complicated the accidental, like a sharp and a flats and all kind of things, and then also like rhythmic notations. But that doesn't mean anything to the musician. I mean, musicians have to read the music and play, which is very different from compositional concept. So that's at least what I can do to be really simple with what I do, what I'm thinking. But whenever I work with musicians in general, I always try to see their music level first, and to challenge them, but then not push too much for them. So I know that maybe I could write like much more complicated things if I want, but I'm not writing for a robot. I'm not writing for a computer. So as long as my musicians feel comfortable, or like my musicians would enjoy, then my music sound enjoyable. Otherwise, it's gonna be too much pressure for them. I don't want that level. I think I'm gonna be happy with other people as a composer. I don't want to be like a fighting composer to the other musicians. So I always, try to understand what they do, and then I try to challenge them for sure. But then I don't want to exceed that limit of what they can do too much. That's kind of my interpretation towards that kind of problem. So maybe in the future, if I were to work with AI musician who can do whatever, like 32 notes with the alto saxophone for 15 minutes, maybe I can come up with something else. but I still want to write for this guy, you know? That's
Yeah,
that's the
I
thing.
can't do that.
I know. I wouldn't do that to you. Don't worry. Unless I hate you. No, just kidding. No. So yeah. No.
Cool. All right.
All right.
Well, Miho, thank you so much for being here.
Yeah.
We're very excited about the concert on Thursday.
That's right. We're gonna have a concert on Thursday.
And yeah, thanks everyone for coming out.
All right. Thank you.
Give it up for
everyone.
Miho Hazama.
Thank you. Thank you.